Thank you very, very much. So, healing hands and healing heart. And, oops, where's the... so these are my contact details and the two main books I have written. I've called it Sensory-Motor Art Therapy. And as Jorge said, this is based on expressive arts therapies, Jungian analytical psychology, Gestalt therapy, bioenergetics therapy, and especially the neuroscientists that have sort of come up in the past 20 years with a body focus to working on trauma. So bilateral guided drawing is one of the modalities I teach, which is, you could call it more a movement, a body-focused movement therapy, drawing bilaterally, and adults, if possible, actually draw with their eyes closed. And mostly I'm talking today about clay field therapy, and this would be a clay field. So it is a box that holds about 10 to 12 kilos of clay, just like the setting you see there. And the amount of clay that is given in this container would actually discourage any form of what can I make here, like a sculpture, something to take home. But it is more touch therapy and how can I relate to, what is there? This mass of clay. And this is based on the insight that most traumatic events involve touch. For example, sexual and physical abuse, torture, accidents and medical procedures, unwanted or stressful pregnancies, birth trauma, attachment trauma, or the absence of touch, which would be neglect. And you can see here the hands of this client. It is not about making or creating anything, but here what we call finding a hold. Actually something to anchor myself in the world. And that's what the hands are doing. So why are we working with touch therapy? So we all know trauma is held in the body. And the client groups you're all working with have complex trauma that has rarely got a single coherent story, but presents as a global sense of unpredictability. And unpredictability is a term that Stephen Porges created, who is the expert on polyvagal theory and how to regulate the nervous system. And he creates safety predictability. And when we live in a world that feels existentially unsafe, we are constantly triggered by unpredictability. So trauma therapy is more about nervous system regulation rather than about remembering what happened, because we're dealing with layers and layers and layers of trauma, not a single event. And trauma is isolating. And here in the clay field, we offer through the hands and through touch a relationship. And the bilateral engagement also supports the restoration of balance in the cortex and in the body. So let me say a bit more about touch. Mothers after birth are flooded with oxytocin. Babies understand love and safety, or the lack of it, through the quality of touch they receive from their caregivers. To look at a baby from a distance and say, I love you, will not have any effect on the baby. It is how you connect through touch with an infant. So attachment is communicated through touch. And I would say safety is communicated through touch. And touch regulates our nervous system. And without touch, we cannot survive. And touch, even the lightest touch, releases the love hormone oxytocin. And Laura Cuscinelli is a neuroscientist who especially worked during COVID and researched the sense of touch and found that oxytocin is the glue of the senses. And it showed that it was instrumental in multisensory integration, which is in turn at the root of our sense of body ownership. And I would say this is so important to understand, that if we want to be embodied, and trauma is so much about disembodiment and dissociation, we need to come in touch with ourself. And this is something that most people take for granted, but without touch and without the biochemical reaction to it, it ensues, we do not come into being. So through deteriorating social relationships, we also detach from ourselves. And touch is so implicit, we take it for granted because it's been there even before we were born. Yeah, at the core of life is a permanent feedback loop between sensory perception of the environment and our response to these through active motor impulses. I call what I do sensory motor art therapy. So this sensory perception and the feedback loop, yeah, between the sensory and motor impulses is at the core of my work. And what I found, that complex trauma severs the feedback loop between sensory perception and motor impulses. And at a very implicit unconscious level. And it results either, like as you can see here, in the fear to touch, or in hyperactive action cycles, while the sensory feedback is dissociated. So this theme will be the focus of the next part of what I'm going to say. And you can see here, for example, while the previous one would not be able to touch, this client here is action, 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 moving and moving and moving the client, never stopping to perceive anything. So nothing arrives. And we have haptic perception. So let me talk a bit more about this. You see here an acupressure map of the hand. And this is the somatosensory world of touch. And you may notice that the base of the hand, if you can see my cursor, here, that the base of the hand is related to the pelvis, and this part of the lung and the breasts and the heart. And then these are the fine motor impulses where, for example, if you create something in art therapy with your fingertips, it will, like these are, like the details where you have cognitive engagement, where you see exactly what you want it to look like, for example. The thumb is actually not a finger as such, but it comes and executes impulses that come from the base of the hand. So if you look at this in action, and this is as an art therapist, I look at when clients create. So, for example, you have here, yeah, like the whole body. Yeah, if you look at the hand as representing the whole body of the individual, yeah, is thinking is dissociated. There's no connection. Yeah, can you see the enormous tension? Yeah, here, yeah, in these hands, or like this bracing away from contact in these hands, or the pushing away. If you do this yourself here, for example, this movement of the green hands and push your table away like that, you can feel how instantly your core and your pelvis engages. And then we have, like these hands who are relaxed and connected, here as well, or this nurturing experience of these hands. So I hope I'm not jumping too much. I'm trying to fit as much information I can into this presentation. Peter Levine, who I trained with for many years in trauma therapy, calls about, like the different memory systems we have. And we do have the explicit memory, which is our cognitive symbolic part, where we have conscious stories, autobiography, images, and we can communicate and reflect. But that is just 20% of our memory systems, and these are the conscious ones, whereas we have this huge complex of implicit memory. You could also say that is the body-focused memory. And here we hold the felt sense experiences, learned behaviors, such as having learned to walk or to eat with cutlery is a learned behavior. We don't think about it, but like once you've learned to swim or to ride a bicycle, you actually, your body remembers it. But it also remembers trauma and everything that's happened to our body, even when we were not conscious, such as during surgeries, and all the pre-verbal development in early childhood. So this would be an image of our amazing cortex. That is the like left and right brain, and the one side is very rational and logistic, logic, and the other side focuses on this interconnective symbolic thinking. This is another chart with this similar focus by Bruce Perry in his neurosequential model of therapeutics, starting at the brainstem, which is the sensory state memory, then the midbrain and the cerebellum. And another word for these two would be the motor cortex or the sensory cortex. And then above that, we have the limbic system and our emotional memory and the cortex. So this is just another way of looking at this, where you have the brainstem, and this is where we hold trauma. So brainstem is about procedural memory, as in learned action patterns, nervous system regulation, attraction and repulsion, trauma, and all the emergency responses of fight, flight, and freeze, which are so important when you're working with trauma. And if this brainstem is dysregulated. Basically, all the higher systems are being compromised to the extent that the cortex is actually shut down. So when we work in this manner, it is a bottom-up approach where we start basically with procedural memory, with rhythmic repetition, with just moving the clay, sensory perception of the clay, for example, and feeling the connection and responding to what I want to do. And cognitive integration is then not so much about what happened in the past, because one of the core benefits of working with clay is it's immediate. You can only touch it in the present. But at the same time, our hands hold the touch memories from past trauma. But the cognitive integration at this point would be about realizing, for example, that while things happened to me in the past and I still have these fear responses, I have actually now arrived at the end of a session at a place of calmness and I feel safe. And that would be the focus of the cognitive integration rather than trying to remember what happened in the past. And this is actually very healing and what our body is really interested in. So let's look at all of this through another lens. There were two researchers called Penfolds and Rasmussen who measured how much the motor cortex is informed or informs our brain, or you could say how much real estate holds the motor cortex in our brain. And they actually found that the hands and the mouth almost inform 80% of our cortex. I find this, as an art therapist, really wild, as in, because we're working with clients' hands as an art therapist, and to see that we're not just working with the hands, but we are actually, if we can bring the hands into a relaxed state where they're connected and feeling safe, it will have an effect on the entire brain. I hope I'm making sense here. So when you look at the motor division in the cortex, and this is connected to the central nervous system, the spinal cord, and then the connective tissue. So to do anything, we engage the hands. And you have on one side the autonomic nervous system. These are motor impulses over which we have no conscious control. For example, heart rate, breath, what's happening in our gut, what all our hormones are doing. And then we have the somatic nervous system, which is voluntary control. And I guess most of you working with traumatized individuals know that the body is not a friend. That, if I have a panic attack, everything that's happening in my body is overwhelming. So if their clients in shutdown, where this sensory overload has resulted in dissociation, they benefit from focusing on intentional motor impulses. These bypass feelings which may be experienced as too overwhelming. Johanna will later on speak about the concept of somatic experiencing of pendulation, where you have where you shift the client's perspective from, here is the fear-inducing impulse. Where is it safe? So you don't run with the trauma, but you are pendulating towards the opposite. And in this case, for example, here, the opposite would be working with intention and intense muscle impulses. So these clients who are actually not daring to move and inhibit the motor impulses, because that is a learned way to stay safe. I've seen lots of clients who come from violent homes, as in they tried to be as invisible as possible in order to stay safe. You work with downward pressure, which is organizing the wrists, the elbows, the shoulders, the spine, the hips, the legs, and the feet. I hope this makes sense. So rather than with all the anxiety and the fear that's on the inside, you ask these clients to stand up and to just apply downward pressure. And if you do this yourself, you can actually feel how specific muscle groups engage through pressure. And that supports embodiment without emotional charge. Because what you focus is just what the body is doing. Because no matter what happened to your body, what terrible things happen to your body is still your body. You might have been raped, but your pelvis is still your pelvis. It is not identical with the rape. Through pressure, you are trying to uncouple the trauma from the body. So leaning with the underarms on the table, for example, can remind clients of the possibility of being physiologically supported. Or digging the elbows into the clay or putting pressure on the elbows stimulates embodiment without sensory stimulation through the hands. So these clients, you don't want to track the fear in their body, but you want to actually communicate to them that there is something very solid and reliable in their body that is not identical with the trauma. So the other one is the sensory homunculus that Penfold and Rasmussen created. So this is the real estate our sensory cortex holds in the brain, and you can see the mouth through, like for example, through tasting food, and then also the huge hands, whereas the rest of the body is rather insignificant. And here we come to the core of, if we're out of touch, we're out of touch with ourselves. So again, this is the sensory division of the central nervous system. And again, you have an interoceptive and an exteroceptive part. Our interoceptors are how I perceive my body through orientation in space, proprioception, sense of balance, which is our vestibular sense, and the internal sense, which is all the felt sense experiences of heart rate, breath, what happens in your gut. And again, when you are overwhelmed by traumatic memories, the sensations in the body take over, to the extent that many clients are not even capable of perceiving the outside world. So you shift in the therapy to the exteroceptors, to the five senses, which are dealing with the outside world. So such therapies need to stimulate the exteroceptors, for example, simply orientating in the room. Where am I? Is this safe here? And it may not, but to check. Or through sound, playing music, whereas we've had survivors of the bushfires and the London bombing who had olfactory flashbacks, for example. And the therapy for them was little bottles with essential oils. So every time they had a memory of the fire and the smoke, and that they could pull out these little bottles and take a sniff, just to bring on the exteroceptors enough that they could actually orient and to assess, am I having a memory? Am I having a post-traumatic flashback? Or am I actually safe? And you can do the same through food. Like common sense is, to calm down is to have a cup of tea, or here in this case, working with touch to connect with the self and others and the world through the hands. So we can support sensory stimulation through touching clay, paint, shaving cream, or even hand lotion. And it enhances contact and connection with oneself and provides self-nurturing. And you can see in all these cases how relaxed these hands are, how, like the full, part of the hand is connected, with the clay. So the whole body is connected. So children and adults who may act out with lots of motor impulses. This little boy you see here came from an extremely violent home, and he had dissociated any sensory feedback because it was a learned behavior of his that to feel anything meant to get hurt. So he was just doing, but he was not gaining anything from this form of busyness because it never arrived in him. And we know this. I grew up in post-war Germany, so there was collective trauma everywhere, and people were very, very busy. And no one stopped to actually connect and to sense what they were doing. So here, for example, to offer a bowl with warm water and a sponge can support finding safety and slowing down, and doing nothing becomes important. And also to emphasize that nothing happens, because the hands usually expect something will happen. I will get hurt, and I can be here, and actually nothing happens. My hands can rest in warm water and take a relaxing bath. Another version to facilitate this would be to encase the hands or the underarms in clay, to provide a safe sensory experience. And this would be the nurturing equivalent of a hug. And being held all around can downregulate the nervous system. You always think of the hands as in, that is the whole body, is being held here. And you'll see in Johanna's case example, coming in a moment, how this can actually look. Once safe embodiment has been achieved, rhythmic repetition becomes the organic next step, restoring the flow of life. Initially, this can be discharge of aggression and inattention, including shaking, but gradually turning into dancing, stomping, jumping, pounding and kneading the clay, drumming, dotting, whatever matches the internal rhythm, because rhythm is life. So that was my presentation, and I'll stop the share and hope I'm back in the room. And maybe I just add this bit here. This is a toy that Peter Levine uses a lot in somatic experiencing to explain the purpose of trauma therapy. That he says, and we're coming back to rhythm, like this is the rhythm of life. As in, like this is what every cell in your body does. Yeah, expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting. This is what your lungs do, your heart does, your muscles. And when we experience trauma, we either shut down or we freak out. But both cases are characterized by I'm no longer moving. Yeah, part of me has dissociated. I can't breathe. I can't do this. I can't. And rather than tracking more and more into what has happened, what he says is what's important is how do we find rhythm again? How can I be safe enough that I reconnect with rhythm? And that will regulate my nervous system. And this is how my entire body can realize, I'm safe now. Whatever has happened to me, but it was in the past and it is no longer happening now. So thank you. And I'll hand over to you, Hannah. I think I stayed on time, which I'm very proud of.